I don't believe it. Last time, I don't know what happened, but we're off and running, my friend. So, all right, good to see you.
There you go.
Yeah, get that mic in there,
There you
man.
go.
Let's hear
It's-
this voice of yours somewhere.
You know, my
you
son-
mind me? You talk. I want to listen. Okay, go.
My son said to me this morning, he said, he was talking to his friends, and somehow he got the things he inherited from me. Well, one of the things I got was that voice, and he proceeded to tell me how horrible my voice was. And how,
Oh, did he? Nice.
how
Nice,
and he said, whenever I come up and talk to him, and he's talking to his friends online, they say, "That's your brother?" They said, "Why, you know." So I doomed him to this voice. But he did say, there
Oh
are...
yeah. You pass things down. I mean,
And he
I
said,
had bad knees, so my son played
got
soccer.
bad knees.
He had bad
Yeah.
knees, and I have to work on it. So
Yeah.
hey, welcome to the family. Is all I can tell.
And it's maybe he'll also get my shingles, my
Oh yeah,
Uh,
there's a list of things I remember. We've gone through them.
chronic ED. He's just, he's gonna.
Yeah, there's something about that. All right, man.
Well, it's good to see you. How's your day
If
going
you
so
had a
far?
learning disability
Yes.
and erectile dysfunction, would that be LED? Just saying.
I don't know. I like the joke though. I'm all about the joke. So
Let's see what's going on with that other camera here. All right, so this is just our podcast, and we're just talking. And
Which this is a joke I said. I came up with one this morning. I
Okay.
was sitting at the court. Your wife was there, and there were
Yes,
a couple of other therapists. I don't know if you know Wanda Schaefer or Yvette Richardson. So they were there, and so I'm talking to them, and they're all talking about how that they're banning straws and that they're paper straws and whatnot.
oh, we talked about that last week, and
Did we talk about that?
we talked
We
about
talked about
a little bit of something about
it was-
California and the rules.
It was pressure.
I don't know how far.
Well,
Where
they
it's
were
connected.
saying that some people even are buying straws that they carry with them, and I said,
Right.
and the reason that they're doing all this because of damage it's doing to the sea and whatnot, and I said, well, I'm kind of I decided I was going to carry a straw, so I wouldn't use, but unfortunately my straw is made out of sea turtle.
Oh,
And-
you know.
That's,
Nobody seemed to appreciate
no,
that.
I know. I can see why they wouldn't. But
But I think because they have LED. They suffer from LED.
They LED. Yes. All right, we're gonna come. Let's end the show coming back to that. Okay?
Actually, I just
Before
thought
we
another
go
one. If
to
it's
that.
dyslexia, you'd have DE. Sorry, that's just.
all right, that is something I don't know where we're going on there, but I'm moving around a little bit, but that's okay too. All right, so other than that, so you were in court today. You were dealing with
So it
something.
was, yeah, it was. I did not do it. I don't care what everybody said. It's
No, it
not,
wasn't about you. I think.
I was not. I am not. I'm not guilty. I didn't do
Part
it.
of being a psychologist and getting out there and seeing clients, seeing patients, they're going to end up in court, and sometimes you have to
Yeah,
show up.
it's also
and,
part of having psychopathic deviant trends. I find myself in court a lot.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, I hope that went well, and you didn't make my wife mad. That was the.
That's
Well,
the big thing
yeah.
I needed to still tell you about because.
Well, I
we'll
can't
hear
tell.
it.
I don't think she was mad, but she did stop talking for the last hour or so and just stared.
Just
So I
stared.
don't know if that is what that means.
Not good. Not good. Okay. Well, I know there's some really tough cases out there. I know you guys see.
It's, yeah,
you
I,
practice and you're seeing people have lots of difficulties, lots of issues.
Yeah.
And it's tough. It's tough to kind of.
It's,
but your job is really not necessarily to decide, but to help the court decide what
Yes,
happened.
yes, yeah. If I were the judge, I'd be a hanging judge. I'd be a lot, be a lot of.
You'd
You know.
be.
Yeah, like from the old western.
In the town square, there would be, like hundreds of people just dangling. Just for small offenses too. I would be, I think we should just jaywalking should be capital. That's
Oh, okay. You're cracking that.
Now, so I don't know. I'm glad you're not a judge. I guess that's where I'll leave it right there.
I will say this though: if ever I go to trial, then if they could find a jury of my peers, good luck.
That's going to be a trick.
That is.
Finding a jury of your.
That's right, unless
That's
it's
right.
going to be at the zoo. They're going to find some brain-addled chimps maybe, or How about that? I
That's how I
think
find 12 too. That's a lot. That's a lot.
12 orangutans with TBI. I think that really might be a jury of my peers.
It's something like that, I'm sure. Yeah, let's hope you don't get in any trouble and you need a jury of your peers. This is walk the straight and narrow here as best you can.
Yeah.
Okay, try to keep it within boundaries a little bit there.
All right, so what's on your mind today, my friend?
Well, we talked about this before. We talked about hate. Hate.
Oh, hate. That's
That's a thing.
That's a big one because there's so many things happening in the news. It seems to be hate everywhere.
Here's
all
what I'd
the
like to say,
time.
though. The problem with the people you're thinking about is not that they hate, but they're not good at it. I think if we were better at hate, that the problem with Nazis.
Okay, you know,
You're going to have to explain that.
The problem with Nazis, with the KKK, all this sort of stuff, is not that they are hate groups, but they're not very good at hate groups. That's their problem.
okay. Well,
Let's take a minute and for you to get yourself out of that hole you just dug. Because there's people out there that are going, what is this?
What does that mean?
I don't know.
Well, a couple ways to think about this.
Time to figure that out.
And the first one is there's a man by the name of Donald Winnicott, Donnie W, to his friends and family. DW, maybe, he was British, so they're probably closer. But Donald Winnicott.
Got it.
And he talks about how the parents have to be able to survive the baby's hate. The mom has to survive the hate and be intact. And so the baby has to be able to take all these feelings and discharge them in such a way as that the mom can contain them. She can continue to hold said individual. And as a result of that, we become much more comfortable, or to be able to do something with the intense feelings we have.
Right.
So we can begin to mediate with them, dance with them. We talked about it before, there's a difference between regulation and modulation.
Right.
So if you have a caregiver who can survive your hate, you're more likely to be able to modulate that as opposed to simply regulate it. And so from a Winnicottian perspective, the racist, the person who is who goes on and on about Muslims, or I have a friend in Tennessee who sends these what has he said, that the Democrats are commies. I'm just calling out. They're commies. That's what they are, A failure to do something with the things that you feel will result in some very non-flexible and less adaptive ways to regulate. And finding some place to discharge that, to take all your insecurities and simply place it there, that's an act of, that's one of those isms. And that is not hating in a constructive way.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
That is not being able to do something with the things that you feel in such a way that they could be if one is better at hating, then you don't have to target minority groups. You don't have to target an other to be able to do that. You can get a better sense of what it is you need to do with the feelings you have. And that takes us back to the captain by the name of Wilfred Bion.
Yeah.
And Bion says that there's both positive and negative forms of knowledge, love, and hate, and faith. All four things.
Okay.
And that, for instance, a negative form of love, we know in our profession that you can kill with kindness. If you don't set the right sort of boundaries, you can think that you're being loving, but you're actually doing the opposite. You are disempowering someone. You're generating dependence. You are keeping them from being able to do the things they need to do to grow. Giving too much of yourself to the point that you hurt yourself is a negative form of love.
Okay.
Right? We can take knowledge the same way. In fact, this is a concept I've always thought was really cool, this notion of negative K and positive K. And there was a wonderful study a few years back. They used Fox News, but it could go lots of ways, but it was Fox News. People who thought they knew a lot based on the information they got from Fox News, when they quizzed them later, actually knew much less.
Okay.
So that's a negative form of knowledge. I know that the Democrats are commies. That actually is something that you know in such a way that keeps you from knowing other things that you may need to know.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And
The idea that it wasn't really processed very much. It was almost a sort of a shallow thing, and they wanted to kind of fit in maybe with the group. And I know there's some in-group, out-group kind of thing
Right.
we probably talk about, but yeah, that getting a little bit of information and then acting.
Like, that's it.
And-
Now I know.
And we want to think about this from sort of an affect theory standpoint. That is an act of emotional regulation, not modulation. It feels good to know who your enemies are and to be able to point to one
person or one group of people to say they're the reason the world is the way it is. It generates a convenient and palliative narrative that keeps you from knowing things
you need to know. So, to a degree, our symptoms, this form of negative hate is another form of symptom. They keep us from knowing something. And so, when we
think about positive and negative hate, Bion talks about as a therapist, a positive form of hate is looking at the clock and saying we have to end. That is positive hate. Every time you set a boundary, you are literally saying, to some degree, right now it's all about me.
Screw you. And Bion thinks we should be able to accept that. That there are moments that we have to be able to say, screw you, it's about me right now.
Right. Yeah.
It just seems like people have this black and white view of emotions in some ways. There's no, it's not a continuum of any sort. It's either or, and that seems to get us into trouble sometimes when I think we haven't really processed that, reflected back on it, take a look at ourselves. And how
In fact, black and white thinking, which we're thinking psychoanalytically, why shouldn't we,
Yes.
is what's called the paranoid schizoid position. And it always
It's an act of emotional regulation. Whenever we split, as we know folks who struggle with some personality disorders do, splitting is a way of solving the storm inside of us. You are all bad and evil. To be able to speak those words gives a momentary lapse in the turmoil that is you. It offers a clear indication and path for you to follow to steer you away from the things that could be sucking you in. So, black and white thinking always is, and that is not a positive form of hate.
And I was sort of thinking about it, and I haven't really thought this through, but if we were to, if we wanted, let's say, Nazis or the KKK, if we wanted them to get better at hate, the questions they may ask themselves is, first off, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel that the world isn't fair? And if they were to start there, then coming to an easy solution, well, it's because there are these degenerate people who are different colors, skin color than me, have invaded my country. It could be, wait a minute, maybe there are systemic problems that have kept me from being able to make my potential.
That things are rigged in a fashion, or there have been a series of things out of my control that I need to be able to address and understand so that I
might be able to advance, as opposed to falling back on this negative hate. They're not drawing a boundary that allows them to self-care. They're simply expelling and projecting into someone else the very things they should own. And that's that trap. They're not good at hate at all. They're lousy at it.
Well, that's a very different way to look at it. So I'm glad you kind of brought that up. And the issue that to me is that and it gets back to a lot of things that we've said in various issues of really that self-awareness and that reflection, and then taking time to pause and really think what's going on and why am I feeling in this way and what's going on.
That we don't often do. It's more reactive. And also, I think what we talked about too is projection.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like that's just the easy go-to defense mechanisms to hate others. I'm okay on this side, everybody else, no.
It is remarkably effective. I think I may have used this as an example here before, but I was at one of these leadership things not long ago, and I came into the room, and they assigned you in seats. This is at the university.
Right.
And I go and I sit down in my, what now?
They do that a lot at universities.
Okay, so I'm suddenly, I'm sitting, and I look around and I see everybody around me and their tables, they seem to be talking.
Right.
And no one's talking to me at my table.
Oh.
And so I'm like, you know what, I looked at the table, maybe it's, they sent me with a lame bunch of people. Over there, those are the cool people over there.
Right, look at how much fun the cool people are, and I'm here with these losers.
And they're losers, you know. And that is from a defensive perspective, that is I was experiencing some emotional dysregulation. I had been moved outside of my euthymic window, and the act of projection was a quick and reflexive act of homeostasis. The problem is not me. I don't have to address this.
Right.
They suck. Over there's better.
Okay.
And
And there's some relief in that.
There is.
Momentarily,
Boom, it
is.
is.
Some way.
and so he's, but so I said to him, I think, okay, well, hold on a second. Something's going on here. You know, you're right. Everybody else is talking. And then I realize I have my back turned to my people at my table. My chair is facing this way.
Okay.
And they're carrying on the conversation. So I turn my chair to them, and then suddenly we all begin to talk. And I'm like, they're not actually so bad. And I'm like, wait a minute. But for a brief moment, the solution I came up with, which, short term had a wonderful short term benefit. But it kept me from suffering in a productive way. And I think part of the key to positive hate is there has to be a suffering. There has to be some understanding of what are these intense feelings welling inside of you. And that requires you have to get burnt a little. You have to be able to face that fire to some degree as opposed to simply projecting it into someone else, which is so reflexive and so easy to do.
It's easy to do. I'm with you on that. I don't think people have a lot of practice at that. I mean, where else do you go to learn those kind of things? I mean, basically, it takes a lot of practice to and someone maybe to bounce some ideas off of, and maybe therapy. That's why therapy is working, I guess. For a lot.
I like what you're doing there because I need money. But therapy is one, because part of what happens in therapy, and there are different kinds of therapies. Therapies that are maybe a bit more process focused. Not only can you get someone to be open and own the things they're feeling, there are moments when you may hate your therapist. Or what often happens in therapy is the thing that has to be owned is to be aware of just what sort of tensions arise in any social interaction. And the more common one is to feel less than. I think you're less likely to hate your therapist than to feel, man, I wish I was as smart as they were. Or, man, I had a patient the other day say to me, I bet everybody in your family is just, healthy and balanced and everything. I bet that's the case.
Just this idealized view.
Yeah, that's right. It could be,
Yeah.
And, I could have, first off, I could have shown the MMPI for most folks in my family and say, well, actually, I have some data set to disprove that. But what was important in that moment is to be able to say what they needed to say, but then to explore, well, what was going on with you when you said that? And then they were able to say, well, you seem to have an answer for the things that bother me. And if I can't answer them, it must be there's something wrong with me.
Right.
You know, and I don't know, but it must be there's something wrong with me.
Okay.
And so that began the discussion of, well, let's think about that. And that narrative was far older than that moment. That they are often disempowered in moments of social interaction in such a way that there are emotional needs and attachment connections that get thwarted, and this individual particularly would react through intermittent illegal drug use.
Okay.
They would find ways to. They often feel a sense of, talk about that euthymic window, of emotional dysregulation that's fairly constant, because they often find themselves in this position. Everybody else around me has it together, and I don't.
Right.
And they don't even really know why they're, buying Xanaxes from folks and down on them all the time. But they do. And if we get them to be more aware of, and that requires them to suffer a little, that they are suffering, to maybe have some understanding what that suffering is and what it might mean, and they can answer it differently.
Right.
Well, I was thinking too that, especially when you mentioned social situations and interactions, that sometimes this is like there's a behavioral side to it as well, because you practice something, that's what you do in those situations, and the new situation is going to bring up those same kinds of feelings as well. So you've really learned this over a period of time and reinforced it in some way.
And it's reinforced. We have to say in Mind of the Biz, it causes the cause. So often folks who are so afraid of being rejected will do the very behaviors that generates rejection. And so they're caught in this circle.
Right.
And that's where this notion of suffering, In fact, if we get back with hate, if you have a racial minority that you suddenly feel is somehow degenerate and destroying everything that you love, you can scan the environment and find examples of someone who is worthy of your hate. Because there is literally no group of people on the planet that don't have a percentage of people in them that suck.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
So it literally, in fact, it would be a racist. It would be a racist statement to say that all Samoans, let's say Samoans,
Right.
that all Samoans suck. But it would also be racist to say all Samoans are saint, because both of those are literally pigeonholing and in that projective sort of split place we don't want to be.
Right.
But so it often causes the cause. You can get stuck in these negative hate loops, and they self-fulfill themselves. And they're like, it's like some sort of hate riptide. And ultimately, the person that really drowns is the individual caught in it. They are stuck. They cannot grow. The suffering they feel never finds an outlet or comes to the surface in such a way that they can do something with it. They're trapped by it.
Well,
It's this idea that you don't question things, you just accept and move on. And I think a lot of people want so much to be in the group and be in the tribe, and talk about tribalism so much these days, that that's where they go immediately, and there's a safe moment anyway. And they don't take the time to really look. Do I really hate this person? What is this about? Question their own beliefs.
Well, and think about how that process requires. We talked in here about the notion of assimilation versus accommodation. And in assimilation, your maps don't necessarily change. The information you take just sort of confirms the things you already know. And in some way, that's a little like a negative case or a place to be. An act of accommodation, though, again, I think I mentioned it last time, there's a Greek philosopher whose saying is, all learning is suffering. And to accommodate requires you have to feel some things that you may not be comfortable feeling. In my example of sitting at the table, I had to start thinking, wait a minute, what if the people beside me don't suck? For a brief moment, I had to be, so maybe I suck.
yes.
Or I could say, wait a minute, okay, maybe they don't suck, I don't suck, so I'm sort of oscillating in that paranoid schizoid position. I'm either projecting all the good, all the bad out to them, or then all the good goes out from me. And so there's this moment of seesawing, and there's a moment to say, wait a minute, my suffering may be telling me something. What is it telling me? Right now I'm uncomfortable, I feel lonely, and I feel rejected. What could that be about? And then I notice, wait a minute, my back is turned. How could they possibly? If the message I'm sending to them is, I don't want to talk to you. And so when I turned it around and said, hey,
Oh, wait.
suddenly there was a, and that is the loop. That is, and I was at a, I don't know if you know the French death metal band Gojira.
No,
But,
not on my
but,
list of
I've seen it a couple
albums at
times.
this point.
They're the French death metal band, and I saw them in Atlanta a while back. I've seen them a couple times, and in the middle of a concert, the lead singer Gojira sort of raised his fist in the sky and he points down to the mosh pit and say, "Bring me your hate. This is the place for your hate." And he screams it.
Wow.
And it's interesting because, in a way, that seems, in the context, there was an affirmation in this. And when we think about this, and if you look at some developmental infant studies, if we look at the first thing we could see that would, what is the 0 point for burgeoning hate? And maybe it is the infant whose diaper has not been changed, the infant who has a rash, the infant whose hunger has gone on a few seconds too long. And so what happens there is this emotional dysregulation and then there is this scream and this cry. It's right? And this is part of human development. And how the environment answers it is going to be important. There is the potential for an empowerment. The famous Clash lyric, anger can be power if you know that you can use it. There is something there that if the environment, the maternal object, the holding environment, whatever it is, meets that baby at that point, something can happen. And in this mosh pit in Atlanta, these are all people who have, it is impossible to go throughout your day without experiencing some form. We no longer have wet diapers. We no longer necessarily have to wait. Well, we often have to wait to get the food we want. All the frustrations that build up in a normal day or a normal week or whatever, they have an outlet in this mosh pit. They have an outlet in this music. There is a chance to, as a group of people, to rage against the world that hasn't changed your diaper yet. And I think that's the essence of a heavy metal concert. A group of people all together who are in direct connection with a memory of not having their diaper changed immediately.
Wow, that changes when you go to a concert.
That's
right
it.
now, I'm thinking, and there is a metal band that's called Hate too. I think they do.
There is a band.
That's
There's one called Hate Breed. There's
Yeah.
also one called Hate Beak, which is a death metal band fronted by a parrot.
Okay.
No.
No.
That is serious.
That's not. That's
That is
not
true.
true. You
It
were
is
just
true.
saying that.
I guarantee you,
don't-
if you look it up, Hate Beak,
We have to Google that. now.
Hate Beak. In fact, if you want,
Okay, no,
I
we're
can-
just gonna let that go.
I can.
We'll let that go. We'll do this after.
After it's over, we're gonna
Uh-huh.
go and look at that. So the parrot comes out as the front man.
I have. Let's see. Hold on a second. Hold on.
Okay.
I will. Just a brief moment of some Hate Beak. Hold on. The world needs
Did you
to know.
say Hate Beak?
Hate Beak.
Okay.
Hate Beak is a thing. Let's see. Hold on. There
There's
is.
something about this is not right, and I mean I know it reinforces your theory
Hate
about.
Beak Live. They have a live.
Okay,
Here we go.
Oh, I don't
Here's-
have that one.
Okay, here we go.
I need to get that.
Bird Seeds of Vengeance.
Okay, these guys are having a lot of fun.
Let's see.
This has got to be a lot
Let's
of
see.
fun.
May, what is this?
I'm glad we don't have the computer up, so we have to show that on the screen.
Thank you,
right
goodness,
now,
hold on a second,
but,
there's- Hold on. It's like, what is it? Are we in a bunker?
not sure.
But it's not loading. My Hate Beak's not.
Yeah.
That's
Okay, there you go.
that is okay. Well, you'll have to take my word for it
the
that Hate
parrot
Beak is.
sings. Okay,
Well,
this
it's
is
a
not-
saying. It is a.
All right, we have gone so far down that particular rabbit trail,
Mhm.
but no, I got you. So your idea was that a lot of these events may what's underlying these kinds of things is the sort of, I guess, unconscious notion as well that there's these unresolved things and they connect to a very early part of our lives and so forth.
That's an interesting idea. We have to not regulate hate. We have to modulate hate. And it seems like it happens every day. There's something that goes wrong. The driver that pulls in front of you.
You can think of
all
it.
the things that can go wrong during the day.
At the 0 point of that level of frustration, from the bottle or the breast that doesn't arrive on time, and so hunger rises in your stomach in such a way. And remember, from a baby's perspective, the feeling of hunger can feel like a tidal wave. It has the mark of infinity on it. It is not necessarily something that the infant can say, well, this will begin and end as soon as I eat. It can literally feel as if you're being assailed from within. So if we take that as a 0 point, it is not too many steps there to the economic disenfranchisement that would fuel the racism that drives the KKK. Both of these are frustration, an overwhelming feeling, and the negative hate is a projective solution to that very sense of dysregulation that is inherent in the disenfranchisement. So.
Right, and it seems that it will continue too, because there's no real stopping this, because others in the group are going to reinforce that, so it becomes a collective kind of idea, and then it's on a roll. Then you put together one of the hate groups eventually. There are so many out there. I think hundreds now that are listed by it. so many groups like Southern Poverty Law Center and some other places where you've got a place to go with your hate if it's aimed at a particular thing for yourself. So
that's kind of scary in some ways too.
Yeah.
We can't do that internally and regulate it in some way, modulate it.
Well, it is an element of the human condition that all of us fall prey to. The reason why Bion talks about their positive and negative variances for these sort of basic emotional states is that we, in fact, it may be necessary to fall into them. That part of what may make the reaction formation that occurs with racism sometimes almost as bad as the direct version of it, like we talked about. All Samoans are saints.
Right.
If you don't have the capacity to get lost in your feelings, then you can be stuck in something that literally whitewashes. To be able to see all Samoans as saints is to not be able to meet them for who they are and where they are, and that certainly may be cuddlier and nicer, but it's really just a cuddlier form of fascism than saying that they are, that they all suck. And I guess part of this would be that Bion has this notion that we have to fall into splitting. So we have to be able to see things often first as part objects before we can see them as whole objects. So we often have to have our neighbor distorted to see the worst parts of them, or maybe the only parts we see as good, before we can begin to see them whole. So there may be something necessary in this stumbling. So if we suddenly had a genie and we wished away all hate, maybe we would find ourselves in a form of stagnation. Maybe there would be no way to meet the other. Maybe the necessity of hate is such that the only way we can move forward and really connect is to be able to move through it, which is what Winnicott thought with a baby. We have to find a way to be able to hate and survive hate so that we can move forward. It's part of the movement.
it's very interesting, and in the news lately there's been this Antifa, which is a group anti-fascist, but yet still in these recent days we've seen that group get violent and start hitting people and dressing in solid black with the clubs and the whole thing, and it doesn't seem to make sense because that group was started at the beginning to be anti the racists and white supremacists and Nazis and so forth.
But you can see this there is a way in which my political leanings are to the left, so I can often become so enraged at Trump and those who I see that are his supporters that I often miss the message that's being sent to me. So if 40% of the nation voted for Trump, there is something they were trying to say in that action, and I need to be able to try to listen to what is that message. To simply demonize them, to simply call them deplorables. And that may be the same with Antifa just punching a Nazi in the face. The question you maybe want to ask, it doesn't mean you got to hug the Nazi.
Right.
But if there are people around you who have these thoughts and feelings, then and that's how therapy works. People often come into your office and they have thoughts and feelings that are repugnant or just difficult.
Sure.
There's a famous Bion saying, it takes two people to think a dangerous thought. Maybe racism is a dangerous thought deferred. Instead of the punch, maybe there's the capacity to meet someone where they're at and to be able to help them to be able to think better and make better use of things in their feeling than this sort of projective, assimilative, sort of racist stuckness that they have.
How do you connect, let me ask the question, how do you connect this, we've been talking about hate, but there's also anger, right? So hate leads to anger. What's kind of the idea behind that? It seems like one way to take care of your hate is to act out in violence or do something along those lines. What do you think?
Well, there's a famous quote by Heinz Kohut that that anger is an assertion stillborn, and that the energy behind anger is meant for assertion. So if we have positive forms of hate, we can say, I love you, but I need to get out of my office because I gotta pee. And that's why Beyond said that anytime we set a boundary, for, okay, the hour's up. I know right now you're in some heavy stuff and you're feeling lots of stuff, but this is our ending time. And part of that's because. And the therapist that is unable to set those boundaries, that patients continually go over, and so they literally, their entire day becomes sort of out of whack because they continue to extend the frame in such a way. They go home and kick their dog.
Right.
So,
Comes out in
right.
another way.
So and we would say that, just from a pure affect theory perspective, that it generates a level of consistent emotional dysregulation that begs some sort of discharge. And that there is this tension as it builds and it builds and it builds, and then, boom, it finds an outlet and kicking the dog. So.
Yeah, it makes sense that it follows in that way. So we need to modulate this hate, and it's a normal thing. We haven't used the word normal yet, but we all have the hate that kind of arrives through our day in various situations, and we need to do something with that.
We need to be able to gotta be able to dance with it, right? And that's the difference between regulation and modulation. I know I keep harping on those 2 points, but modulation requires some level of dance. It is only through modulation that we have the potential to be able to learn in the true sense. So we can learn from experience. That's another Bionian term that, and he has he has a phrase, atonement through at-one-ment. And
okay, that's a little.
well, it has its sort of echo in the Kabbalah, but the idea that in the act of suffering in that sort of modulatory way, we are at one with the context and the experience that we're having. We are not removed from it. We are both participant and observer. So there's a level of at-one-ment. There's a joining and a connection. One of the things that primitive regulatory function does is it keeps you from having to feel or be connected with some of those parts of yourself. There are primitive regulatory functions can easily keep you from at one with not me states, the parts of you that are you but you just don't want to know, or that you're not ready to know, or that are too much to know at that moment. And we talked before about this notion of dyadic and solitary regulation. So, we, with really severe dysregulated states, we typically need some sort of dyadic regulation. It's not something we can necessarily do on our own. We need somebody else to help us. It doesn't have to be a therapist, but it can be family, friends. In those moments, we have to have a place to be able to bring this. It takes 2 people to think a dangerous thought. When you're a baby, you're in constant need of dyadic regulation. You cannot change your diaper. In fact, but over time, you internalize the maternal object in the environment you come in, and you begin to bring it with you wherever you go.
Yeah, I would think having a friend or a therapist or someone to talk to and bounce some ideas off of. At the same time, I realized, well, if these groups are becoming more popular and people are joining it, they're getting help from a person who may not be helping them modulate and regulate that. They're encouraging it. And it becomes, it's interesting to me that it just takes up a lot of energy and effort to hate. I mean, you have to spend time at hate. Do you wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'm ready to hate again?
Well,
what happens?
Well, we've talked about that. And this would be something to have a larger discussion on. But I don't think anybody wakes up when they're a kid and says, I'm going to grow up and be a racist, the best racist there is. Just like I don't think anybody grows up and says, I'm going to be a rapist. I'm going to be the best rapist there ever was, or I'm going to be a meth addict. I'm going to be the best meth addict. So, in a way, all of these things are a failure of sorts, a combination of guilt and tragedy. and to untangle those, probably, and we're trying to sell to some degree therapy because I got to get that boat.
Yeah, no,
But-
we're still after the boat. But
It does make sense that, wow, if there's all of this energy that goes out, time on task, if you will, kind of supporting and being in the group, getting reinforcement from so many different people that continues that hate, you often don't have a break in it. It seems exhausting.
hate is exhausting.
Well, here's the thing and there's the theorist Jacques Lacan, again, not to be confused with Shaka Khan.
Got it.
He taught us this notion of jouissance. In some ways, this is tied to old Freudian notions of drive theory, but he thinks that there is a perverse level of enjoyment we have with our symptoms.
Okay.
So there is something that feels good about hating. If you've ever been in this state where, the guy pulls out from under you, out in front of you, and you're on your way to work, and you're like this, there is an exhilaration. There is, maybe the baby that is screaming at the world because the bottle hasn't arrived yet is finding to move from that passive state of being at the whim of your hunger to this raging mini Viking attack on the world. There is some sort of excess enjoyment. There's something you get from that, And so we could say that even though it might be exhausting, maybe it also carries with it a perverse joy. If you look on we had the alt-right folk, was it in Virginia? Where were they at? In North Carolina?
Charlotte.
That's right, Charlottesville. When they were in Charlottesville, these guys were having fun. They were throwing Nazi salutes, and there is an orgiastic element to the sort of, and what Lacan would say, a jouissance. There's enjoyment there, and part of untanglement, getting at, and either finding an outlet, or if nothing else from Lacan's perspective, it makes it really hard to be able to give up a symptom, because not only does it cause its own cause, but it also brings with it this investment. It's drama and tension, violence. They're not boring.
That's kind of an interesting way to look at it, and it continues over a period of time. It's almost as if people see that as a solution. If we can only take care of that other side over there, the enemy, and do something with it, things would be great. If we all thought alike, which doesn't seem like that's going to happen.
But yeah, there's some relief in that in some ways.
It's hate peak.
We're going to have to go back in here. Hate beak.
Hate peak.
Okay, and the parrot. Well, that took some creativity on their part to come up with a group. Was that designed at one of the big record companies that put that together?
I don't think it was.
These guys, a garage band that said, "Hey, what am I going to do with this parrot?"
I like to think that the parrot put an ad in the newspaper. This is not. Sorry, that this is SpongeBob. Here goes hate peak. Here we go. We should hear some hate peak.
Okay. All right, you want to hold it up to the mic a little bit?
Here goes hate peak. That is the parrot going, "Arr, arr."
Oh, it is.
That's the parrot. That is hate peak.
You've really got to work to train the parrot to come in on time and stay with the beat.
But I find that interesting. Well,
I'm not sure we've ever played hate metal on
Hate metal.
on
Well,
our show here today.
You can think of that part of the point that art can serve is that it allows us a facilitative outlet for affect states that
Right.
we can we have a place for unthought knowns. And there was an interesting study about folks who like heavy metal, particularly as kids and growing up, and this notion of some of that be more violent, they do more drugs, found to be just the opposite. They were less likely to have these sorts of experiences, and they've never been to a heavy metal concert. The people there are often really nice, and the guy, because you're a guy, at the end of the concert,
told everybody how much he loved them and brought his mom out and hugged her on stage. So there's
not what you're thinking.
so there really is this sense of like, you know, that this was a ritual experience that allowed people to dance with, maybe expunge or at least dance with certain affect intensive states. And maybe, I mean, we get that at football games, right? You get it, you know, the metaphor that you use, destroy, you know, we're gonna, you know, blitzkrieg and all these sorts of stuff. So there are other places too, I think.
Yeah, well, there needs
To be a release for this, we have to manage that hate. We all have it, it comes, we have to deal with it in some ways. I think it's a very interesting idea. If you were going, I mean, you probably get clients that come in and patients that come into your practice and that say and let it out how much they hate another person. Is that a moment for you as a therapist to say, okay, let's break that down and talk about it some more in terms of what they brought up?
Well, it depends on, every therapist has their own sort of style, but I think you always want to meet someone where they're at. And so if someone comes in and they say that they want to die or they hate someone, I think there needs to be a portion of the session
To just be that. Let's want to die for a while. Let's hate for a while.
Right.
I think they all of those things are ways for you to be able to you have to.
You want to honor that. Like if you look at the example that I gave with me, you know, I had to for a moment feel that the people around me were better than the people I was sitting next to. I had to fail in that way to be able to get close enough to the thing that I needed to know. So if someone comes in and they hate, I need to be able to let them hate for a moment or two, and then we can find, you know, what, you know, and even with what you said, man, like, that sounds, you know, man, it sounds exhausting, or, you know, this sounds. There's a way to begin to open up the possibility, and with most folks, you can get them to be curious about anything that goes on inside them. If you create the right amount of space, they can begin enough distance from it to be able to say, what is this? What is this thing that I feel? Why is it here?
Well, I like our discussion today. You know, the idea of hate, and it's, I don't know, maybe in the last number of years we've gotten the internet and everything's always constantly feeding us information and news, politics, and those kind of things, which can lead to some of those reactions that may formulate and move on to hate. But you have to look inside about why is that. Experience it a little bit, feel it, and then try to figure out what you need to do next.
And I might want to say that those folks who can look toward the folks who are marching in Charlottesville, and if they can, if all that generates in them is a feeling of contempt, then they may want to ask themselves, they may be in a place of hate. They may be projecting something and splitting in such a way that there's something for them to learn that they haven't been able to dance with. That it may beg for a modulative response, one that they may need to. It is easy to be caught in this negative hate without even knowing it. So.
All right, so how are you feeling right now? You have any hate you're dealing with?
I got
Any
I gotta
kind
go
of
and
thing we
listen
can
to some
help out?
Hate Beak. I'm gonna crank up some Hate Beak and
Beak.
some Hate Beak.
You know, if this thing catches on, you could help the band.
I can help that hate.
Some hate beak.
Yes.
Good
Did they play in Atlanta? Is that what you said?
That they were on tour. They play live, so there is you know, I don't know what the parrot does in the force in the
What does the
full
parrot
brunt of up on stage, but apparently you know
the parrots on stage is the front man. Okay. Well, all right. Things we learned by just watching this podcast. Okay. All right, my friend. Hope everything goes well for you. Let's stop there. I'll see you next time.
Next time.
I think that actually straightened.
What's he doing?
I would laugh the entire time. I would just be I would,
That's actually
you find
SpongeBob.
yourself